Okay, so this is a double camera trap station. Not for the scientific project I'm doing, but more because we had a surplus of camera traps and this is a really good position to put them. So we're going to try and get some high quality video. So this camera trap here, it's browning, it's pointing along this fallen tree because it's the only fallen tree, or only thick one, for quite some way, either way up the stream. And therefore your smaller animals that have a good sense of balance will be using it as a bridge. So that camera trap is a really, really good way to identify those animals, and also, you know, this will act as a bit of a choke point, so we'll see them in great frequency, hopefully get some really good footage. Let's get a look at the front of the camera trap there. Not the most disguised thing in the world, you know, the animals will see it, but in my experience they tend to walk up to it, investigate it briefly, and then carry on if they're bothered at all. Now, there is another one. I don't normally put two in the same place, but the reason for that is because this is where the larger animals essentially use this slide to get down to and cross the river coming up on the other side. So my pals who I'm with, my field assistants, have identified tapir tracks in the mud down there. And so I'm hoping that we'll get footage of the tapir's face as it climbs out towards us here. Although, of course, as is the nature of camera traps, you might just get a really good shot of the arse.
Xavi Tobin is a practiced tropical rainforest ecologist. He is currently a master's student at the University of East Anglia, studying conservation and applied ecology. He chose the University of East Anglia because the world's #1 tropical rainforest ecologist is there. Xavi has led research expeditions to the Amazon. He studies mammalian distribution patterns, species richness patterns, and community assemblage structures as a function of changing season and forest type. Now, this film is unusual because development took place over 2 interviews. That's not unusual, but not only that, it was during our first interview that we agreed that Xavi would record for the practical animal during his next expedition. So, in the film, you will see us talking together and also Xavi speaking whilst in the field. This is the first time on the practical animal we've been able to bring a demonstration of the skills you need directly from the field. And before we go any further, I want to thank my subscribers. Without you, there would be no channel. And please let me know in the comments section below if there are questions you would like me to ask future guests. Working in tropical ecology and living the wildlife looks like this. Xavi, what jobs are there in ecology?
One would be the academic route. You will, of course, end up in a university or research institution, and you will then be looking at pure ecology, and no doubt you will probably move into conservation at some point. That's very much the way that things are going at the moment, and rightly so. You could end up as perhaps a warden for a forest or an RSPB reserve. I've got friends who do this. They are avid ecologists and conservationists by dint of their job and passion. You could end up in a consultancy. So ecological consultancy is really kind of booming at the moment because there are so many legal requirements before new building projects, before new farming endeavors, and so on. and someone has to, and an ecologist, often a consultant, has to sign off on that. It's a tricky one because you're often telling the developers exactly what they don't want to hear, and so you'll get a lot of pressure coming back the other way. But again, I'm not in that field.
Javi, for a bit of context, what do you do? Where are you sitting now? But more importantly, perhaps, what have you just come back from doing?
So I am right now doing my master's degree in conservation and applied ecology, so not just theoretical. I'm doing that at the University of East Anglia, and I'm here specifically because the number one Amazonian tropical forest conservationist, ecological researcher, Professor Carlos Perez, was based here. So I came here so as to do my big master's project under his supervision. And I'm coming to the end of that project now. And part of that is that I've just got back from Brazil. I was in Brazil for the last, I got back a little while ago now, but this year I've been there for almost 3 months. I was there for almost 3 months the year before, and I'm going back for 4 weeks or so for another conservation project at the end of the year. And the time just gone, and the time before, I was gathering data for my project.
And am I right in saying that you were in virgin rainforest in the Amazon, setting up a grid of camera traps to survey mammalian density?
Pretty much. Two grids though. So I was in, as you say, primary. Well, I was in. Just keep it simple. I was in rainforest, a very long way from anything. And the aim of that, it was a purely ecological study, and so that distance was by design so as to give isolation, because human presence demonstrably causes this landscape of fear effect, and that affects mammal distributions. And I wanted to remove that variable from the equation. I wanted to look at mammal distribution patterns, richness patterns, community assemblage structures, purely as a result of changing season and forest type. So there are two forest types in that part of Amazonia. Broadly speaking, you've got terra firma, which is upland, and you've got várzea, which floods every year. And you end up when the flood comes with this really, for us, quite surreal, I think it's fair to say, as a Westerner, but this kind of surreal landscape where the whole forest is underwater and you can canoe between the trees. But my study, as you say, was with two grids of camera traps, one in the upland and what, so the terra firma, one in the várzea. And by comparing the abundances of the animals there and the community composition, one can basically establish if those abundances, those distributions fit the hypothesis of movement. Is there movement? Well, there must be movement between these forests, but how does that occur, when, and so on? And you can almost, or I try to confirm that by sticking down a second grid in the terra firma while the várzea was flooded. And so I was expecting to see an increase in species richness in the terra firma while the várzea was flooded, because the biodiversity of that lowland forest would have been compressed, at least the terrestrial biodiversity, the stuff that can't climb, would have been compressed into the terra firma, giving it a higher richness. But I ended up not seeing that. So there's more research to be done there. But some species very obviously did fit that hypothesis of movement.
Javi, were you actually cutting through the forest with a machete in order to place camera traps in
Yes,
position? You were.
yes, I was.
Now that must have been physically hard work.
It was. I was very, very lucky to have the assistance in the field of two local chaps at any given time. It's also a safety thing. You never want to be in that environment alone. Um, but despite the fact that that was the case, yes, it was immensely draining. And as I'm sure I hope some clips you'll play over the top of this of me cutting through the forest, or in many cases, just walking down paths that we'd cut before. It's tricky, and that's not just because of having to actually cut through physically plants across the way, but because every step there's a route or there's something or a hole or a really deep little ravine to fall into, and it's draining. And one of my knees actually very nearly gave up. I got it. I'm waiting on an MRI check because after tens of miles of that per day, and very steep elevation changes. Yeah, I really started feeling it. So yes, it is tough.
Javi, to try and get a sense of just how physically demanding it was laying this grid of camera traps in the rainforest, what skills did it require apart from immense strength and stamina and tolerance of discomfort?
It's very, I mean, I think you've kind of summarized it there. Those are kind of those are base level requirements. You need to be at least able to read a GPS.
Day 4 of chopping through the jungle. I'm using a GPS to work out the path we have to take between points where we'll deploy camera traps. And actually the quickest way to get to the next point is along this fallen tree. So you can see it's enormous, stretching all the way back there. But the jungle is so thick that we actually have to cut a path along the tree. So I'm going to walk over now extremely carefully because, as you can see, there's a bit of a drop off either side down there. So yeah, that's life in the jungle. Even walking is a job.
And interpret what it's telling you because you need to be precise. If your camera trap placement is off by 100 meters, all of a sudden you might have two cameras too close together, in which case statistically you can no longer consider them independent. And so that can really mess up your science and your findings down the line, for example. So good with maps, good with navigation, good with GPS. Maps won't help you actually that deep in the forest. You can't see anything, it's just trees. So good with GPS. Um, then safety, just knowing what is acceptable in terms of equipment and the strain on your own body. So recognizing that you've got a problem and dealing with it. That's big. So dealing with injuries as they happen, or better yet, prevent them. The two big ones that I think are often kind of overlooked are both kind of soft skills. So this is always a kind of team building thing, right? Well, not team building. Ideally, you've already got the team, but you need to be able to get on with your team, and you need to be, and a sense of humor really helps. And there are times when things that you might not normally be totally comfortable with, it might be a cultural difference, whatever. You just got to let it go because this is not your environment. The forest is theirs, and respect for their way of life is the most important thing, really. So yeah, just understanding social context and bigger picture, I think is huge. And, I will never fully learn it. The absolute bare minimum is that we educate ourselves. And in doing so, one would hope you get on better with your team. And therefore, the team dynamic remains strong and you're able to have a laugh together. And that's how you can get through it.
Mm, mm.
Here we are, loaded to the gills, walking through the jungle. Big bag on the back, machete tucked into the side, slightly smaller bag on the front, a couple of litres of gasoline. Life is good. This is not a permanent state of affairs. Essentially, this is all to keep us going from the field base. For those of you wondering why I have a mohawk and have shaved off my beard, it's because, frankly, it's too hot for that here. Although it has revealed that at times I have a somewhat unfortunate jawline. But that's life. There's not too much else to say. The trail is pre-cut, which is good, because otherwise it would take days to make this trip. And of course I'm sweating. It's probably about 10 to 9 in the morning, and I'd guess it's about 30, maybe 31, 32. And of course the humidity is ridiculous because, we're in the middle of Amazonia. The other fortunate thing is we've only got to make this trip once, because once we're there, we eat all the food we've brought with us. Of course, we supplement it with fish. And that means far less to carry back. Likewise, we'll use up fuel. And, of course, we'll use up water. That's a big one. There's no filter at the base, so we have to bring it with us. So Let's work out how much we've got. Well, if there are, okay, so there are 5 of us carrying equipment here. 3 will stay, including me. We'll be here for at least a week. So, it's warm. So, okay, well, not a working week, so 5 days. So, 5 days, 3 guys means at least probably 4 litres each per day, so 12. And then times 5, so 60 litres just for the guys who are staying. And then for the guys who come with us as well, we need, well, at least another 4 each, just 4 today. So we're getting on, as well as for ourselves today, but we're getting on for at least 80 litres, which is 80 kilos to carry through the jungle to the base. It's going to be a long day. I don't know if we'll start trail cutting and camera trap placement today, but it's going to be a long day. That sound is howler monkeys. Haven't seen one yet, but you sure hear them. They use that howling essentially to establish territory. And they sing or howl in the mornings and the evenings, and then essentially those howls maintain a boundary. Right, I'm going to go and focus on walking. We're just walking along. We had or hacking along. It's a jungle. Had a bit of a close moment. I'm going to turn the camera around. We were probably about 2 feet away from treading on that. Kia nome dele, amigo? Surucucu. Surucucu. Surucucu.
Surucucurana.
Surucucu. Okay, I don't know what that is in English, but I'll check when we're home. And I'm told it's extremely dangerous, so I'm pausing and thinking. And just like that, after 2 months, we see it again. And it's been looking all the way down this stream. How cool. More jaguar clues. If you look at this tree, you can see it's actually been torn to pieces. And these are claw marks, essentially where the jaguar will rake its claws down the tree trunk. So, again, I haven't yet seen a jaguar here, but camera traps are out and all things are looking good.
So yeah, initiative, lateral thinking, and something that is often overlooked.
Somebody thinking about a career as an ecologist, it's such a vast area. How can they focus their ambitions?
Well, I'd say ambitions should be based on one's interests. So first things first, think about what are you most interested in? And then think, okay, if I want to be an ecologist and a conservationist, is that relevant to my interests? Because, you know, the wildlife I might be interested in might be doing just fine. So in that case, you've got to kind of work your way down your hierarchy of interests and see, okay, where could there be a job in this? Where can I actually try and address the problem myself? Right. Once you know the kind of area you want to be interested in, I just emailed the author of a paper that I read where I was really invested in what he was saying. And I just said, look, I would love to come and gain some experience with you and learn about what you do and how you do it. Would you take me? And fortunately for me, the answer was yes, and everything kind of stemmed from that. So in terms of how to kind of narrow it down, read. It doesn't just have to be reading. You know, you just got to consume media that is relevant to your interests. Could be documentaries, could be whatever, and then get in touch with the people who are doing that. The worst they could do is say no, you know, or blank you. Doesn't matter. Just try again. Find a different one. But once you've got that answer, and if you get a yes, then that's it. All of a sudden, you've got that opportunity. You go, you make the most of it, you throw yourself in. And from that experience, you will hopefully find the next opportunity and so on.
Okay, so it's a lovely bright morning in the Brazilian Amazon. My team and I are down there. We've been cutting paths into the rainforest, very, very narrow paths, essentially just wide enough to walk down, to pass by. And every 500 meters, we've been putting down a camera trap. The idea being is that if you lay each one of these paths, 2 kilometers long, side by side, 500 meters apart, you get a grid. And using that grid, we can work out essentially what's here and in what quantity. Now, where the grid lands, and therefore where you put your camera trap, is essentially quasi-random, but every now and again you get really, really lucky. And as you can see, I'm standing in a dried up riverbed. And actually the point at which this camera trap is meant to go is pretty much bang in the middle of the riverbed. Now, this is fantastic because, well, essentially we've got really, really lucky because animals use the stream bed as a highway, more or less. So in our quasi-random sampling effort, we've actually found, or I wouldn't say we found, a point that we can deploy a camera trap at has landed in the middle of an animal highway. Perfect. And the evidence of how well this is going to, or I hope this will work, is here. So as you can see, there's kind of this, up the bank, we have this, I'm not going to call it a staircase, but a step essentially up from the forest into the riverbank down there, riverbed, pardon me. And you can see there are little footprints at the end of the machete there, of animals that have scrambled up the side here. That is the toe mark of a tapir, lowland tapir. There's a couple of other things in there. I'm not sure what that's the footprint of, but there are definitely peccaries around, so I wouldn't be too surprised. And actually, in the riverbed earlier, well, I think unfortunately one of us stood in it, we found jaguar tracks. Okay, here we go. I think one of my pals has put his has used his fingers to kind of emphasize it a bit, but that, at least until it was exaggerated using fingers, that's the jaguar track right there. So what we've got is our camera trap, and that's looking this way. So anything coming down or going up the riverbed will see using that. We've only been cutting through the jungle an hour today, and we've already run into a problem. So this has to be my least favourite type of farsia terrain. So it's thick, as you can see. There's no real easy way to get through that, and it's all absolutely covered in these spines, which really hurt, especially if you cut that one down to walk through and then it falls on you. Not good. I have a piece of basic processed sausage meat on a hook. Let's chuck it in. Wait for a second. And ka-chow. Yellow belly piranha. It is that easy. Huh. Right there. Hey. Você quer uma terçada ou meu?
Do you need a degree? If so, is a bachelor's sufficient, a first degree? Or do you need a postgraduate degree, a master's or even a PhD?
If we revisit the question at the beginning, so, what jobs in ecology are there? That helps us to answer this question. So if you're going the academic route, then you're going to need to work your way all the way up. You're going to need bachelor's, master's, PhD. And then, you become a researcher at hopefully your institution of choice, or postgraduate researcher, I should specify, and then professor and so on, which summarizes an incredible career path in about a sentence, I think. And it's probably an oversimplification, but if academia is your interest, that's how it's going to go. With your other things, your reserve managers or whatever, the more practical stuff, you don't necessarily need a degree. That would really depend on the site and the job spec. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but that's really going to depend on the organization and what their requirements are. With regards to needing a master's, that just helps you, I think, in many cases, get the edge. on possibly the same job applications. Yeah, and actually the other thing often with a master's is through your master's degree, you can make some connections which can lead to further employment. So do you need one to be an ecologist? It depends what you're doing, but it can't hurt. If one has a job in mind at the end, which to be honest, I think most people going into their bachelor's degrees probably don't. But if you do, and it's in a kind of ecological discipline, then just check the requirements and see, okay, if there are a few of these, how many years experience do I need, if any? If it's entry level, do I need a degree? And if the answer is yes, then you got to go get it. But you'll have a great time doing it. So, worth it in that instance. Do it for the passion.
Fast forward 3 years. Now
Yeah.
we're talking 2025 right now. What might be an entry level salary?
God, this is a really difficult question. So, first off, because I leave, 3 years of financial speculation to the bankers, but it's probably not going to be much of an improvement on what's going now, unless, with the exception of ecological consultancy, where you'd be looking at average grad salary plus, which I think if you're in London is 30 something. It is not a well-paid profession, and that's not a secret. You're not here for the money.
Javi, how can new entrants going into their first career ecology job prepare for an interview?
You are going to be asked to probably talk about some experiences that really show off your skills relevant to the job. So it is a good idea to have some of those just ready to go. That demonstrate your initiative, that demonstrate your leadership. Likewise, it's a good idea to, of course, research the institution that you're applying to, whether that's a company, whether that's an NGO or a university. Look at what they value, look at the work they've done, and work out what you've got that is relevant to that. Or if you don't have that, if you don't have that experience that is directly relevant, show that you're passionately interested.
What should somebody wear for an ecology job or internship interview?
There are different schools of thought on this, but I'm of the opinion that one should dress to show that they consider this a serious opportunity, formally, respectfully, to be interpreted as the viewer does. See how that institution that you're applying to, how it presents itself. So if you hop on the website, often there's a meet the team board, and sometimes that'll be really formal, sometimes it's less formal. It depends, right? And that kind of gives you a benchmark. You go a little bit above that in terms of formality, then that shows that you align with their values, but it also shows that you care and that you're taking this very seriously. Although obviously, don't go higher than suit. Don't turn up in black tie. There's a there is an upper limit.
I did that once.
Honestly, it's impressive. I wasn't expecting that answer.
I didn't get the job. Javi, Javi, most people in this situation, going for an interview, come to that dread moment where the interviewer, or worse still, the panel, turn to them and say, now, have you got any questions you'd like to ask us? What are good interview questions?
If you know who your panel is going to be, it can be, and you share an interest with someone who has a very particular expertise. It could be a good thing, I think, to ask them a question that you've always wanted to know the answer to. Use that expertise, and that shows two things. One, it shows a bit of initiative, and two, it shows that you've done your homework again, and evidently respect the expertise, if you like, of the people that you've been talking to. It's normally a good idea to just double check the holiday policy that you'll actually get some time off. Again, that might be something better clarified over email. Ask if there is any answer that you've given that you could elaborate on. Or if you have made an answer, if you've answered a question that you're not quite happy with, you could say, look, I said this for one of the questions you asked me, but I've been mulling on it, I've been thinking on it, and actually I'd like to elaborate on that a little bit, if that's okay, and then ask the permission to do so. And then that could actually let you correct an error that you'd previously made, or maybe explain something that you hadn't quite explained very well. And assuming that, your interviewer isn't sick of you, they'll probably say yes. Because that shows you're thoughtful, really. And it also shows you're happy to correct yourself, which is no bad thing. One should be confident in their answers, but also willing, with new information, with new thinking, to change the answers. So but yeah, asking someone with very specific expertise about something that interests you that relates to that expertise, I think shows multiple good qualities.
It strikes me that somebody in your situation, and let's face it, there are thousands of people who are going to the tropics from a temperate country,
Yeah,
university, to do tropical ecology, to do going to the tropics to do science on
yeah.
a temporary basis because of visa requirements or
Hmm.
real world limitations.
Yeah,
If they decide they absolutely love doing tropical ecology in the field,
yeah.
is that only ever going to be a pipe dream for somebody, or are there ways that they can actually move to that country long term?
Really depends on the country and how willing they are to, let you immigrate. Um, And it also depends on the profession. Of course, academically, if you want to fulfill that ambition to work in a country academically, then it will be a pipe dream unless you can, jump through the various hoops of academic rigor. Being ambitious and passionate about something and, wanting to hit your dream is all well and good, and everyone should strive to. But thinking realistically about whether that's possible based on one's abilities and skills is key. But again, that said, skills can be developed. So you might have one go, it might fail, work out why, fix it, try again. It's always worth a try.
For people watching this who are thinking, yeah, ecology, I could get into that, what sort of literature should they be reading?
Okay, there is one book that you should start at. A it's part of Oxford University Press's A Very Brief Introduction or a Brief Introduction series, and that is simply a brief introduction to conservation biology by Professor David MacDonald. But there's a lot of pop science on the natural world, and that should be read, I think. A lot of it's very good. Actually, I'm not going to say the majority, but if you can read pop science on ecology and it really gets you going, then you are learning, you are broadening your perspective and mindset whilst, enjoying the process. Scientific papers are great for kind of the really specific issues and obviously data-driven conclusions. Um, but you've got to enjoy it too. And so, yeah, pop science, pop ecological science for an aspiring ecologist.
What conferences should people be looking out for to be in the loop in ecology?
I'm of the opinion that if you're starting out in your kind of your ecology career and you're a student, conferences are great, but I'm not sure how much value one might get. And that might be quite a controversial statement, but like the student often is very, very careful about their budget. And so if you can't get a grant to go, you've got to think about your train ticket or your time out, and then going to the conference itself sometimes. Not all of them are free. That can actually be quite expensive. So weigh up the value of the conference you're looking at based on your interests. Always like, okay, is that conference actually relevant to what I want? And I would encourage uh, for any ecologist looking at going to a conference, just be very careful about your expenditure to get there. But actually, I'd say the best place to go is probably at the university you're already at. If you're doing ecology, if you're studying ecology or biology at an institution, there will be PhD students presenting their work. There will be there'll be professors that talk about their things. Like where I am right now, there was a climate conference. There's loads going on. So just keep in tune with what your university is offering and go there. If you're early in your career, that is probably the best option. Then, if you don't get enough from that, okay, every city is adjacent to another, which probably has another university with another biology department. See what they're doing and see if you can go. That is the best way to do it at minimal expense. The bigger conferences that are hosted centrally, and you get your celebrity scientists coming in, and tickets cost a fortune sometimes, and all of that. Those are typically not, I'm not convinced those are aimed at the aspirational undergraduate.
Javi, you are studying ecology at the University of East Anglia. Thank you so much for being on the Practical Animal channel, Xavi Tobin.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, John.